finally time to talk about the renaissance of the real marketing. So today's topic, we're going to talk about what the real marketing actually means. Why do we need the renaissance of it? We're going to talk about transforming tech startups into grown-up businesses. So today, my guest is somebody that I've been chatting a lot on LinkedIn, Nicky Dibben. She's strategic marketing advisor to tech CEOs, accelerators, incubators, investors, and provide, generally like tech ecosystem. And what I like about her that she's a generalist, but has her own frameworks and ways she works with mostly, CEOs or founders of the businesses that have like 10 to 50 people, mainly tech and product oriented, and is the sweet spot of the companies that I work with as well. So I think we're going to have a nice chat. But first, join me in welcoming Nicky to the show. Nicky, welcome.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Finally, as you say, we've been chatting on LinkedIn for ages. So we decided the best way to make it real was to put something in the diary and record it.
Exactly. I mean, there's one thing that I disliked a couple of months ago, or it was a year ago, when LinkedIn approached me, to be a beta tester for the audio events. They don't record this. You cannot record it. And I'm like, why would I just record something and maybe have the best content of my life and not able to reuse it in any other way? And I was like,
absolutely.
No, I'm going to
exactly
stick to this.
Same. Yeah, some of my best content, I watch back something that's recorded. I'm like, oh, did I say that? And then I think, oh, I did. And then, yeah, you get to, because live to me is where the magic happens, because you're just, you don't have time to process and, make everything so perfectly polished and poised and this lovely bit of prose. You actually just have to, be there in the moment.
Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I like to live stream these recordings, because like, I have no idea who's listening from LinkedIn, because there are some people you don't see them. Like here on the Restream, we cannot see people from LinkedIn. LinkedIn doesn't allow the data, but when you go to LinkedIn, then you can see like there's 15 people or 20 or however it is. But then I had a dinner with my wife's childhood friend. She's a business lawyer. And, I didn't know her. And my wife said, this is Nemanja. You met him only shortly while we were crossing the street. And she says, I know Nemanja. I'm watching every live stream that he does on LinkedIn, like every week. And I'm like, okay, I didn't expect that.
It's scary, isn't it? But that's the thing, though, about like, you don't know who's there listening. I mean, I have people that I finally meet, and some of them said, I make a point, if I'm sitting on a train, I look up every single one of your posts and read them. And I'm like, you never like them, you never engage with them, you never comment on them. They're like, no, but I make a point of looking them up and reading them. And I think that's partly what keeps you going, isn't it? Knowing that, people actually do pay attention, even if you don't always get the visible metrics of it.
I mean, exactly. I always say, I repeat a lot of posts basically because, I'm aware that sometimes people don't see them. Sometimes, they see, but they forget about it in a month and they do the same mistakes all over again. And that those are things that are happening all the time. And that's why you need to do it over and over. For example, like whatever we posted on during the weekend, it was holidays all around the world. And there were not many people on the platform. So if I had a great post and it did perform well, I'm going to post it again. I'm not going to bother with 6 people reacted. Who cares? I'm going to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to do variations on a theme. So I think I probably should just repost stuff. I'm very, very precious about it though, because I spot when other people do it and I don't mind when other people do it. But especially because you've only got a certain number of messages to talk about, you're a specialist in your particular area, you want to talk about that. So you do end up repeating things. I tend to sort of paraphrase things and rather than directly repeating them. But actually, people have said, look, you should just repost the exact same post, stop worrying about it because, if someone sees it for the second time, they're not going to mind.
Yeah, let me tell you one thing that I realized when I started in 2020, I was talking about, the shift from lead generation to demand generation, chasing of business models, the way we buy, those kind of things. And not many people reacted to that. Not many people realized that it's happening. But then I repeated all the same posts like 6 months ago, and there were reactions, right? And then you can see when you are early. So I often use it to test things out, right? And what I'm seeing, are other people seeing it as well, or no, maybe I'm too early or whatever it is happening.
Yeah, I do the same thing in that a lot of my thoughts that I have, I sort of will test out as a LinkedIn comment, or I'll test it out in just a conversation I'm having with somebody. And if people start nodding and going, oh yeah, you're right, then I turn it into a post. Because sometimes you think, am I the only person that has this opinion? Am I the only person that's thinking this? And so I'm getting braver at just going, you know what, I think it, so I'm therefore declaring it valid, and just posting it. But at the same time, it's nice if you're in a meeting with real people to bounce a few ideas off them and go, right, okay, I'm not insane here. This is an idea that's actually worth writing up and sharing.
Yeah, that's one thing that we all need to remember. You become more braver, right? That's something that's extremely important, especially for the people who are just starting to be active. But tell me, let's make an intro to the renaissance of marketing. What's happening now, and why it is important that much that we need the renaissance.
Well, to me, it's less about the renaissance of real marketing and more about going back to where it started in the first place. I mean, to me, I don't think it's very complicated. To me, marketing is just everything that comes between your business and your customers. It's that simple and that complicated, in the same breath. And what I think has happened now, and I've got a post actually in progress that I haven't posted yet, but I'll share it here, in a worldwide exclusive. It's basically talking about, where has all the marketing gone? And what's happened is that product, rightly or wrongly, has become the king of so many companies now. They're completely product focused. Everything is product-led growth, product-led marketing, product-led this. And product has become its own sort of, kingdom within a company. Then you end up with, the other two or four of the P's. You end up with price and place, which are effectively, pricing, lovely, and place is just, a posh word for distribution. They're then looked after by kind of a bit of sales, a bit of finance, a bit of operations, a bit of everybody else, a bit of product. So that's dealt with. And this is why 90% of people think marketing is promotion, because it's the last of the four P's that are left. So that's one fundamental problem that has happened, is that you say marketing, people immediately think promotion. But the other thing that I think is more concerning is if you look at how it's been carved off, the product people, they claim to be customer champions, but most of them are primarily inward looking. They interface with engineering, they interface with operations, they get products out the door. Then you've got the promotional people who are not involved in any of that at all and just go out doing the fluffy stuff to the market. So there is now this gap that there didn't used to be. So by carving off these different functions, you've not just separated them, you've actually created a bit that is missing, which is this interface between what the product people do and what the promotion people do. And luckily enough for you and I, we fill that gap because we can talk both those languages and we can, bring the entire organization together. So there we go. When I write that up as a post, you'll be like, well, that's not surprising. She said that on my podcast. But that's where I feel a lot of the problems have come from, is that there is this disconnect because of separating out marketing into its constituent parts. So to me, the renaissance is just put it back together again, please,
Yeah, I cannot agree more. There is one thing that came to my mind while I was listening to you, and that is the example of Airbnb. And Brian Chesky, the CEO, he just had an episode with Lenny Radzinski on the podcast talking exactly about the changes that they have implemented in Airbnb, because he realized, amongst other things, that product does only inbound. They do only inbound, and they needed the product to be inbound and outbound, meaning they didn't do the storytelling. They didn't do the part which is marketing part, right? Because they were all stuck in project tasks, meaning how do we manage things? Do we need to set up meetings, whatever it is? And then they don't have time to think about it. And also, those are the thing that you mentioned. Those are like engineers, people with different background, developers. They are building the product. Is it working? It's working. I'm good, right? From that perspective.
Absolutely.
That's what happens. And then, when you get to the point that you need to go to the market, then you get the feedback, and then you get a slap from the market, and then you realize, maybe I should have done some things earlier and maybe involved outbound motion in it.
Yeah, or let's get some customers involved. There's a radical thought. Let's talk to our customers. And again, I mean, don't even get me started on the whole, go to market stuff, because my logic is, if you're not going to market all day, every day as a business, what are you actually doing? Why have we again, created these new words for this thing that is now Well, so go to market. I interviewed a bunch of CEOs last year, and I said to them all, what is your main problem? They all said go to market, and I said, tell me what you mean by that. Now, some of them it was a business model, some of them it was onboarding, some of them it was not really understanding their value proposition. I'm like, every single thing you do is going to market. I don't understand why we've had to A, carve this off as a separate thing, B, overcomplicate it with language. So now it'll be like, do you have an event-led motion for your go-to-market plan? And I'm like, what, are we going to a trade show? I'm fairly sure that's how we used to, describe that in ye olde days. And then what they've done is talk about, well, it's now sales and marketing and product and customer success. And I'm like, well, 3 of those are marketing anyway. So, so it's just aligning sales and marketing to get stuff done. I'm like, oh, what? Like we all should be doing all day, every day anyway. So again, to me, the renaissance of real marketing is just, let's just put it back together again and let's stop overcomplicating it. I talk a lot about translating technology to human, which is one of the things that I do an awful lot of because I work with tech companies. But the other thing I found myself talking about more and more is actually translating marketing to human on the way in, not just translating technology to human on the way out, because I think so many marketers just do themselves a massive disservice by making it more complicated than it needs to be. It's a skill, it's a discipline, it's a learnable thing that we can actually do. Don't try and bamboozle people by making them believe it's this magical, mythical, fairy dust, because it isn't.
Totally agree. And I see a couple of things over there amongst the things that you said. First of all, is when I got into the B2B, what I realized is those are sales companies. They know sales, and that's all. And that is what was important like 10 years ago, when we didn't have the technology that we have now, that we can measure a lot of stuff, when we didn't have the approach to anyone basically in the world in just 1 or 2 clicks, right? So, and then pandemic came, and that's changed the way we buy and the way it should change the way we sell, right? From that perspective. But also looking at marketers, they are kind of like still scared to get closer to the revenue. They're like, let's keep in our safe zone. Let's not, be responsible for the things. We can create like materials for the sales, organize, webinars, go to trade shows, whatever it is. It won't touch us. We are not responsible for the results. That's why we are good. From that perspective, and if we add to that, how do we now measure marketing based on leads, right?
Yeah, this is where you get into a whole minefield, don't you? Because I do always say that a lot of marketing is not measurable. But when I say that, what I mean is you cannot attribute a single sale to a single act of marketing. That's just not a thing you can do in a B2B world. I tell the story about Joe, who when I was VP marketing doing my New Zealand gig for a few years, we sold $2 million of radios to Joe. Now, did we do that because, of one particular trade show we went to, one particular email we sent Joe, one particular, sales guy that knew him, the fact that we realized that I used to go to school with his daughter or something random like that? You cannot attribute, a single sale to a single act of marketing. So there's that. And then also, and this is just my own personal bugbear, is that if marketing is not rewarded when sales guys meet their revenue targets, why should we have revenues attached to a marketing role and get penalized when they don't? It's got to be either upside, you've got to balance it out. And if we're going to take the risk and be in control of it and have revenue targets associated with the marketing role, then we should have the upside that sales get when they meet those targets as well. At that point, you can put numbers, in what I do.
I totally agree. And you are just the same team, right? Including customer success, you are all the same team working at the same, going towards the same market, selling to the same people. Sure, you can separate it and do different stuff, but it's important that alignment exists, so you exchange opinions. What happened today at this call? Let me tell you, this is something that I found out that I didn't know before. Maybe you don't know it either. Right. So from that perspective, maybe that would be something that we can change from that perspective. Then customer support says, hey, I saw this couple of times, and maybe it's something that we'll keep repeating. So we can implement that as a new thing inside that. And maybe that will be something that will separate us because we found out that we didn't know it before. Just an example, a lot of things can happen because in B2B, usually the sales cycles are longer and nothing happens overnight.
Yeah, and especially if you're in sort of an earlier stage. I mean, one of the projects that I did a while back was, and again with this sales and marketing alignment, when I say that some problems that look like they're sales problems are actually marketing problems, I'm not saying, I wrote a whole post about this, about, things that manifest themselves as sales problems may actually be marketing problems. And it got interpreted as this whole blame game. And I'm like, at no point did I use the word blame or say that anybody was to blame or talk about sales and marketing arguing. I said that a problem may not be the problem you think it is. And so, I mean, sales and marketing working together is, there's always going to be this natural tension, as there should be. And when I was VP marketing and had my VP sales, we would argue every day. He would promise the moon on a stick to customers and he'd promise it tomorrow. The operations guy would be like, nope, never, not happening. And it was my job to bring those worlds together in a way that we had a product roadmap that was, aggressive but achievable, and we got stuff done. And then, sales is always about short, always, again, I'm generalizing, but, you can argue, well, sales is short term and marketing is long term. Sales is transactional, marketing is relational. I'm like, well, okay, we'll bring them both together and put the company first and put the customers first. And then the right answer will actually, fall out. And I just finished this project, which, as you say, about taking feedback, was exactly that. In that every Monday we'd generate the messaging for the sales team. Every Friday we'd regroup with the sales team and say, what did you learn this week? What meetings did you have this week? Then over the weekend, we'd change the outgoing messaging, and we sort of wrapped a whole discovery process into the sales process. So they weren't selling, they were discovering. And every week we would just, tweak the messaging a little bit. We maybe had a word that, you see patterns. We'd see the same word come up or the same phrase come up, and we would use that. So we tweaked the messaging over the weekend, and then the next week, we'd go out with refreshed messaging. And this company, they got more meetings in, I think, 6 weeks than they'd had in about 18 months, because we iterated and we learned and we just, moved forward.
Yeah, totally agree. I think I hear a noise somewhere.
Oh, sorry, that's just a phone in the background, but it's not.
Yeah, all is good. All is good. Yeah,
last time I did a live podcast, I had builders crawling around in the attic above me, and that was really annoying. And then when I watched the playback, you couldn't hear it. So I thought, I'll just ignore that. That's not for me. It's all good.
There is one thing in there that I see a lot of, especially early stage companies, don't understand that you don't decide what's good. The customers decide, especially in the early stages. You don't know them. You don't know which content is good. You don't know if the messaging is right. You need to see the results. But the mistakes they are making is, everybody has eyeballs on marketing stuff, and everybody, answers to, is it good or no? Everybody has an opinion, because marketing seems like the thing everybody knows. Right.
Well, everybody can do marketing. Everyone can do marketing. I wouldn't dream of going to an engineer and telling them, oh, that screw might want to go left and down a bit. I wouldn't dream of doing that. And yet they come along and go, do you want to change that bullet point? And I'm like, well, no. And they forget that. And again, so yes, it's a skill. Yes, it's a discipline. Yes, it's a learned skill. But so is engineering, and that's the thing. So no, everybody cannot do marketing in the same way that not everybody, can or should interfere with engineering. Or you can imagine going up to a software engineer and going, oh, should that be a colon or a semicolon, mate? I mean, you don't go and mess with the software engineer. So if you've got professional marketers doing their jobs, don't mess with them either. Your input, it's like your input is welcome, but your vote is not, would be, the way I phrase it.
Exactly. That's why I said, everybody can say their opinion, but there needs to be one person who makes a decision. I always get back to where we started Funky Marketing. My experience was in B2C, right? So what I needed feedback, because I saw the gap. I talked to 260, 70 people. I work with Gimba Hub Belgrade, getting early stage startups into their accelerator. So I proven my hypothesis in a way, but I still needed, a feedback on what we do. Are we on the right track? Do we need to tweak a little bit? And creating a website, I wanted to have a lot of text on it, right? The guy who started Funky Marketing with me, now he's still working with me as doing like the PPC part, but he was like, no, let's do it as an e-commerce website. Nobody likes to read, right? They all want pictures, a little bit of text. And I said, no, but we don't have blog. We don't have any other materials. Only thing that we have is a website. So I wanted to have as much text as possible. And then we look Hotjar and follow what people are doing, and they were actually using mouse as a pencil, and going line by line, and you can see that they're reading, and I'm like, yes, that's what I need. We can tweak it easily and reduce the amount of text, but I want to see if that's the right thing. I want them to get educated.
I also think this thing about people don't read is absolute nonsense. I mean, some of my posts I write, some of my longer form posts get a lot more engagement and a lot more traction with the right people, because it's not that people don't like to, people don't have this sort of 3-second attention span. And it's not all about, is your hook right? If you actually write a piece of compelling prose, what stops people reading is the fact that you don't write compelling prose, not that they won't read long form text. Because basically every sentence you write, you're just giving permission to get to the next sentence and permission to get to the next sentence. And so if you write compelling prose, people will read it. So it's not just about bite-sized things and imagery. Document your thoughts. People will read it.
Exactly. There is one thing that I always get back to in this couple of months, because we are all producing these shorts, right, from the longer conversations, and you cannot find out more in them. Maybe they can motivate you to go and look for the longer video or whatever it is. You can hear one sentence, but they get people's attention, and you go and you share them. But what I realized is it's just short time. Maybe somebody will like, somebody will follow the page, that's all. But if I want to actually get clients out of it, I'd focus on long form content, distribute it with audio, and get actually the people who are really listening to it, right, from that perspective. And they would listen and they will come back. And I usually say to the people, I will do it now in the middle of the episode, I usually say, go back to the beginning, listen, stop on specific parts, because we both share a lot of things. And then when you see the need, reach out to Nicky, reach out to me, whoever it is, maybe continue the conversation, or if you have any questions, whatever it is, get it back to us, and we'll continue the conversation afterwards. And, and if I just do the shorts and focus on that, maybe one of them will be entertaining. Maybe the headline will be entertaining, but that's it. They won't find any real value in it.
No, but it is funny because I've just posted this morning, actually, the last of a sort of series of video snippets from a podcast that I did. And it is funny because there's literally, I think, been 5 sort of little 1-minute chunks of video, and they do each contain a perfectly valid point. But if you look at it, it's like you're only getting one tiny point. You do have to sort of listen to the whole thing and sort of see how a story evolves. But at the same time, sometimes you can come out with sort of a nice pithy one-liner, which does lend itself quite nicely to a little snippet of video. So this morning I realized I was talking all about vaporware, and then you watch it back and think, I can't remember saying all those jolly clever things. So it's nice to put snippets up, but I think this, you can't, I mean, on the one hand, I agree that, the mighty is built from the minutiae. I say that a lot, which is that, it takes lots of little tiny things to make a big thing, and each of the individual tiny things are very important. But you kind of have to let them all add up to a bigger whole. If you just see a tiny snippet here and a tiny snippet here and a tiny snippet there, you don't really get the full picture of, the fact that somebody's actually, building a mansion in the background. Again, comes back down to balance and needing both.
Yeah, I mean, I always say that to the people as well. There are people who are not active in LinkedIn at all, right? But still able to be a huge business and a good, healthy business. And I say to the people on LinkedIn as well, when somebody becomes active based on what they have been doing before, it matters, because then people see, I know this guy. I saw him on the news. I saw him on television. I saw him in the business papers, whatever it is. I knew him from somewhere, and now he's on LinkedIn as well. Let me go and check out, and those people grow faster. But
this
I wanted
is
to ask,
LinkedIn is not the whole world, and people need to, that's I LinkedIn to me is both a blessing and a curse. In that, I've got work from LinkedIn, but it's not. I do things in the real world as well, and that's what people sort of forget is, LinkedIn is it's just a little microcosm of the real world, and a lot of it is opinions taken to extremes. And actually, in the meantime, we're all getting on and actually building real businesses in the real world with real people as well. And so it's just realizing that and sort of getting the balanced approach. And also on LinkedIn, everything's either perfect or disastrous. There's no, we're just getting on quite nicely, thank you, and building a nice business, thank you, and everything, could be better, could be worse, everything's fine. You don't, nobody posts that, do they? It's all despair or euphoria.
I mean, it's a better hook if you say if you are exclusive, right? Or go to extremes. That's how it happens. But tell me, looking at the companies that you are working with, and I think this is something we didn't talk about that much on the podcast, maybe valuable for the people. What are some things when you enter the company as an advisor, as a consultant? What are some things that kind of a couple of steps that you do from the start to basically, align everybody around the goal that you all have?
I think a lot of it is, there's probably two main things. One is, I think, going back to first principles. It's actually, working back from, sort of what are the objectives, what this business is actually trying to achieve, and have we got all those building blocks in place? So do we have a business model that is robust? Do we know what we're selling and to whom? And you may think you know that, but when you start questioning it, you might see, especially businesses that have been around for a while, they've got what I call Franken businesses. They've built on a bit here and a bit there and a bit here and a bit there. And then they suddenly realize that they're, bits of their business model are contradicting each other, or they're confusing their customers. So going back to first principles and just really thinking, have we got a business model? Do we know who we're selling to? Have we got a point of view? And then secondly, it's prioritizing and it's focusing. There's just so much going on and so much noise. And I think, so in line with going back to first principles, it's also about, well, look, there are 100 things we could be doing right now. What are the 3 things we should be doing right now, which will move us forward? And we do kind of what I call like a rolling boil of 3 things. So one could be longer term, one could be shorter term, one could be product oriented, one could be, business model oriented, whatever it might be. But we pick the 3 things that will have an impact, and then we just keep, adding more to the list as we knock things off the list. Because if you try, to me, there's a lot of school of thought of you should only ever have one thing. Now, to me, one thing is just, that's just too limiting, because you'll make it so big that you won't achieve it, and and B, what if it's the wrong one thing? If you say these are the 3 things we want to do, then you can have a big one, a small one, and a medium one. You can have a long-term one, a short-term one, a medium-term one. And if something isn't quite right, you then, you adjust one of your 3s. Whereas if you've put all your eggs in one basket and it's the wrong basket, you haven't got 2 other things alongside it. So 3 to me is a good magic number that we tend to work with. But it's about focusing and about prioritizing, and we do that really by aligning that with the objectives and the first principles that we've just come back to. What is this company trying to achieve?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would like to see people who are focusing on only one goal or one specific action. Usually it's the big one, and then it goes out. Marketing is as good as fast it can ship things, right? And then if you have a team which is used to look up to perfectionism, and then it means they need a long time to go through every single thing, to check out everything, because you are aiming after the big goal, right? We don't need to rush. And then basically at one moment they just say, we didn't do anything for 3 months. And maybe you as a consultant are then too expensive, or maybe we need something else, right? Because what I'm seeing in those smaller companies is usually when I get in, the team that they have often is not the right team for the implementation of the strategy. Usually it's creative director persona, or people who know how to do videos, creative stuff. But when it comes to the marketing execution or operations, usually those are not the right people. And then, from your perspective, if you are focusing on 3 goals, this is something that we can do with this team. Short term, let's do this. Then looking from wider perspective, we need to get somebody in house which will help us with that, and then move forward with those things.
Yeah, and I mean, that's another thing, especially with tech companies. The way they tend to evolve is they start off with a CEO and a CTO, and then they get some technical people, and then they get some more technical people, and then they get a product person, and then they think about getting a salesperson, and then they get somebody to do everything else, from the office parties to where are the tea bags to the finance to the HR. And then they finally suddenly go, oh, hang on, strategy and marketing. Now, A, I can argue that, well, you should have involved, marketing from day 0. But B, then you tend to end up again with gaps in that, the first marketing hire is quite often either a generalist who wants to wave their hands in the air and not get anything done, or sort of a content focused person. And, and the problem with that is there's still this gap, between like a content person and a CEO, because a content person will be like, well, I'm going to write this lovely big article. And the CEO will be like, yes, I'm never going to, there's no way I'm going to read 2,000 words of an article, let alone approve it. And so you still end up with this gap. And that's where it's all about then, well, what are the processes? So it's not about how do we get a piece of content out the door. It's what does the process look like so that the content person can do their job effectively without the CEO being a bottleneck. What does that process look like? How do we break it down? How do we design this process? Well, okay, we come up with a few ideas and get the CEO to say yes, no. Then we expand the ideas the CEO likes into, a few more bullet points. They say yes or no to that. Then we interview the CEO so that we're actually, we can do that on the fly. We can do that while we're making coffee. We're not distracting them particularly. We're not asking them to read a weighty tome or write a weighty tome. Then we write up the piece. And at that point, you're 98% more likely to get a yes because it's all of their content and their input. You've just sort of, put it all together in a sensible way. So so it's about going in and figuring out what these gaps are, what these bottlenecks are, what these disconnects are, and then just kind of, putting the world back together again, really.
Yeah, I can only agree. I mean, it looks like from this perspective, and I always get that feedback from my team, like what you are saying and what we are doing, it seems obvious, right? The solution seems obvious, but why aren't companies actually doing that? That's always a question.
It's only obvious from the outside, so that would be the first point. And I think, so A, it's only obvious from the outside. B, we have to remember that a lot of the people we work with, they haven't done this before. And so I get very grumpy with all the LinkedIn posts that go, where you're going wrong is this, and this is your problem. Because actually, it's not that people are stupid. It's not that people are ineffective. It's not that people aren't capable. It's that they have not done this before. And therefore, it's our job to help them understand what needs to be done and get it done. And then I think that the third thing really is that it's kind of like this, the straw that breaks the camel's back, and that when you go from one person to two people to three people, everybody gets an input, everybody gets a voice, everybody gets to decide things over Slack. But then you suddenly realize, oh, we've got 8 people, we can't have them all making a decision. And at what point does it creak and creak and creak and then finally snap? And so it's actually sort of, how do you recognize actually the time is right to get some processes and get some infrastructure? And because you can't go into a 2-person company and go, these are the rigorous, detailed processes you need. But at the same time, you can't wait till there's 50 people and then go, yeah, you're not all designing a strap line together, boys and girls. That's not happening. So it's about recognizing the symptoms of this is about to break. Let's put some processes in place. So I think it's all of those things, and I think we need to treat our customers like grown-ups, which is why I'm saying I get very annoyed with this whole blame game. Like, your problem is this is what you're doing wrong. That's not helpful to anybody. Whereas just kind of going, you haven't done this before, I have, let me come in and help you. To me, that's much less aggressive way of, fixing the world.
I totally agree. And I was recognizing myself in your words, like we all been there, right? We all play the blame game at one moment in our careers. That's what happens. So tell me, I always say to the companies, to everybody actually, they always ask about AI, those kind of things. And I said, I always like to go reverse and go to the basics, because always the solution to the complex problems are in the foundation. We missed a step or two or those kind of things. And then we always get back to, do we talk with our customers consistently? When was the last time that you talked to your customers? And if it's the early stage companies that just starting, I always tell them, they always have the outbound team, but the outbound team is trying to sell. And I always tell them, do you know exactly that those people are your customers? Can you actually confirm that? If not, let's use them to schedule conversations so we can actually find out more things. So tell me a little bit about those things about talking to customers, because I think this is the essential part that everybody likes to skip, especially marketing people. Like, we don't like to talk to the customers. That's always uncomfortable.
Yeah, I've done a whole thing about sort of talking to customers. I mean, one of the series of posts that I did was all about sort of what I call minimum viable customer, and that's kind of comes somewhere in between your minimum viable product and your ideal customer. It's this minimum viable customer, and what I mean by that is people that will take and play with what you've got now and give you their honest their honest feedback. So they don't have to be, it's not the minimum viable audience thing, which is just people that love you regardless. It's people who will critically, take what you've got and play with it. And there's a number of reasons why people don't talk to customers. And I think it's that firstly, nobody likes to be told their baby is ugly. I mean, that's the fundamental reason, isn't it? You don't want to get negative feedback, but it's actually better getting it sooner rather than later. Then it's kind of, well, how do we structure it? Because you've got qualitative and quantitative, and the logic there is, well, do both, because the qualitative research makes you see things that you didn't see before, and the quantitative stuff starts putting some data behind it, and the quantitative stuff, when you get data, gives you more ideas to then go and pro qualitatively. So you have to sort of get this spiral. But I mean, there's two things. One is that there's a lovely book by Ryan Levesque called Ask, and it says, you can never ask customers, the customers can never tell you what they want. They can only tell you what they don't want and what they've done before. So I like that as a precursor to thinking about this stuff. And also, we forget that it's just a conversation. If somebody's agreed to talk to you, don't worry about taking up their time. They've already said, yes, I'll have a conversation with you. So treat it like a conversation, and people like to be asked questions. And then we think, well, oh my God, I don't know what to ask a customer. I don't know what to say. Well, just start with, one question and let the customer talk. And if all else fails, use the last kind of couple of things that they said and repeat them back to them with a question mark at the end and get them to talk a bit more. So I think we forget that it's just a conversation at the end of the day, and that's all it is. And we do that all day, every day. We have conversations. So it's about just getting over this kind of, whether it's fear, whether it's lack of processes, whether it's a lack of just, what will I do with this information? I mean, that's the other thing, is that so again, every bit of market research or everything in general, just start back from the end point. What decisions am I going to make based upon the data I'm going to gather while I'm talking to customers? And if you go, okay, well, we're going to make the decision, a go, no-go decision on a product, or we're going to prioritize the top X features of our product, work back from that. Because if you know what decisions you're going to make, you can then work out what questions you need to ask to get the information you need to make the decisions you need to make. And then most importantly, just, have the first one, because once you've had the first conversation, you realize it's not that scary, and then you will have another one. So yeah, I still haven't unpicked exactly what it's all about, but to me, starting by going, it's just a conversation with another human being. It's like you see people on social media and you think, well, they're bigger than me, or they're better than me, or they're this or they're that, or they've got a big fancy job title. Well, at the end of the day, you're all just human beings, having a conversation. And if somebody's agreed to give you their time, then graciously then take them up on it, and have a conversation.
Yeah, I had that situation like a week or two ago. I was interviewed by the guys from Ukraine, and when we started recording, they told me that they've been following me for 4 years, and they created a whole community around demand generation and those kind of topics. And I asked them, why am I finding about this just now, like 4 years after? Right. And they told me, look, you were first somebody, I added on LinkedIn. Then I look at your posts, those kind of things. Then I was reacting. Then you were there every day. And then basically you were growing, and I was watching from a distance. And at one moment, you seem so far away, equal to some other people that I admire and I follow. And just sending a message to you seems like a huge thing, right? And I said, so that's how people envision those things, and that's what's happening. And that's why I always like to to everybody that I'm connected with, just send a welcome message, whatever it is. It can be a template. Just start the conversation. If you're honest about it, nobody will mind. And if you are taking over the marketing team or starting as a consultant or fractional CMO, and I always say, maybe the founder have something that they don't have time, whatever it is, to connect you with the customers, right? It can happen. It can happen a lot, or it's two of them, they are on different sides, but just pick up the phone, find those people, pick up the phone and say that you are, an advisor working with a company, and that you want to help them get better with the product that you are providing for them, whatever it is. Everybody will accept that conversation when you have that narrative in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just forget to do that. We just forget that it makes me laugh because it's one of my friends who may or may not be listening to this. She always talks about Nicky and her decades of experience. And I always just feel like so remarkably old. And then I think, actually, I look back and I think, oh my God, she's not wrong, actually. I mean, I've been running my own business for 24 years and I had real jobs, before that. And so and that's the other thing that I sort of slightly off topic, but I also think sort of slightly relevant. And I've been doing, is this whole idea of sort of mentoring and talking to customers. It's kind of the same thing in that it's all conversations. And I think people who have been around, like you and I got told the other day, oh, you bring the grey to every party. I'm like, well, thanks for that. But, we're always, to me, we're always willing to help. Don't take advantage. But, I love nothing more. Anybody I speak to, I happily say, I will happily give you an hour of my time if I can help you with unpick some problems that you're trying to have. It's amazing what we can achieve in an hour. People don't believe me, but I do have a half-day workshop where we do a lot, but also in an hour, we may not have solved all your problems, but we'll certainly have a really good understanding as to what your problems actually are, not what you thought they were, and we'll know what the next steps are. And so don't be afraid don't be afraid to ask people for advice and support along the way as well. Just don't take advantage and don't use and abuse that, and don't, but at the same time, just ask. It's just a conversation. That's just sort of a side note. But I think it's important that how can we can't complain about the next generation of marketers if we're not willing to help them be better. You can't hold both of those positions simultaneously.
Yeah, and kind of interested about your answer here. There I see two waves kind of going. One saying that now is the best time to be a marketer because we can measure everything, we can get closer to the revenue that any other times, and the way people buy has changed. Those kind of things. On the other hand, others saying it's the scariest time ever because budgets for marketing are getting lower, customer acquisition costs are getting higher, and the time spent of a person leading the marketing team is getting shorter because of all those things. The pressure is highest level ever, looking at the economy and everything else. So how do you see it?
Oh, that's a really interesting one. And I think it is easier to be a marketer because we've got so many tools at our disposal, and it's, we can get help with the bits that are, soul destroyingly boring. I mean, my logic to anything is that focus on what you're good at. And to me, which comes back to where we started this very conversation, which is that if marketing is about everything that comes between your business and your customers, if you focus on that being the reason you get up and go to work in the morning, then chances are you will be doing the right thing. So is everything I'm doing taking us closer to that position of us, closing the gap between us and our customers, or further away? So that helps you prioritize it and focus your day. And also, don't get distracted by the shiny tools, and don't get distracted by metrics for the sake of it. So again, I did a post the other day, which was about, it's all very well measuring things, but what are you measuring, and why are you measuring it? And it's also about how your metrics develop over time, not just the metric in and of itself. So like I said, if you say, well, it was 1 yesterday, it's 2 today, well, is that +1 or is that double? I mean, how is it meaningful? How are you actually using these numbers? And so data is like anything. You can use it for good and evil. I mean, you can give me any data set and you can give me any message that you want, and I will find a way to make those two things meet, for good or evil. And so I think, yes, there's all this data at our disposal, and but we need to use it in the right way. And also, we just need to be not so scared to use our our gut instinct. And I feel that if you're using data as a crutch or as an excuse to not just apply your brain to any given situation, then you've kind of only got yourself to blame, really. So, I mean, it sounds terribly, elitist, and I don't mean it to, but what I am saying is, focus on what you're good at, focus on putting customers first and foremost in everything you do, and you're going to be hard pushed to go terribly, terribly wrong.
Yeah, that's very well said. There are a lot of angles that I needed to think about while listening to you, and I think that's always good, right? From that perspective, what I think and what I'm seeing is it all depends on the mindset of the company first, because like the mindset is what leads them to choose the metrics, and choosing the metrics, it's usually in most companies, it's what determines if they're going to set up marketing to fail or to be successful. Because if you follow the metrics which are not aligned with what you want to achieve as a company, and your goals are different from what you are measured on, then basically your arms are not in the game, and you need to go just without it.
Yeah, so I mean, take leads as a metric. I mean, that's just one of the most nonsense metrics of anything. Oh well, look, I went to a trade show and I got people to put their business cards in a jar to get a free iPad. I've come back with 300 leads, aren't I awesome? Yeah, 298 of those people are never even going to give you the time of day, let alone a purchase order. And so, but then you end up just spending too much time working out, well, how do we qualify a lead? And again, it's like, we should stop trying to put people into boxes and into journeys. And again, I get very ranty about the customer journey. Is that the customer journey is hilarious because we can't control it, we don't own it, we can't put people into boxes and shuffle them down this conveyor belt, moving them from one or moving them from one box to the next. It's not linear. It doesn't stop when we get a purchase order. So again, ask yourself the question, my job is to close this gap between my company and my customers. So do I answer the questions that I'm most often asked? Do I have materials or people or whatever I need for whatever stage people might be at and whatever they call it? Your job is to make your customers want for nothing. If they want information, it should be available. If they want data, it should be available. If they want to know, about the industry you serve as a whole, you should be experts in your space. So it's about going, not what is this linear customer journey, but what am I asked that I can helpfully provide the answer to before I'm asked it. And so is everything I'm doing taking me closer to that gap of, joining the dots between my company and my customers?
Yeah, I always look to the example, because I'm from a small city, when like Michelin factories, and people working in 3 shifts and all those things. If you are not over there, you're a failure until you made it in a different way. And like marketing used to be seen like that, and the whole B2B sales, right, as assembly line. You go first one stage, then they move to another one, then move to another one, but then people forget that people are consuming information in all the same places, no matter in which stage you set them in, right?
Yeah.
And it's not,
Well,
as you said, it's
why
not
do we make it
linear.
so complicated? I mean, I did a whole thing. I think my news. I think I did my newsletter last week, which was my article. Well, it came out last week or this week. I can't remember. But I said basically the information that you provide to people, it broadly falls into 2 categories. You're either educating people or you're differentiating yourself. Now, pretty broadly, you're going to be in one of those 2 categories. Then, at the other end, you're clearly doing the whole closing a sale and all that good stuff. But where is this whole we have to convince people they've got a problem thing come from? I mean, this is the other thing that, customers fall broadly into 4 categories, right? You've got customers that say, yes, lovely, take their money, off you go. Customers that say, I don't know. Well, then you educate them at that point. Customers that say, maybe. Well, then you differentiate yourself at that point. Customers that say, no, leave them alone. Don't try and convince them they've got these mythical problems that only you can solve. There are 3 other categories of people you could quite happily be dealing with. So leave the no's alone would be, don't. So someone said to me the other day, well, how do you convince people of this and how do you persuade people of that? And I'm like, well, you don't. Your job is to be there so that when people, are searching, they find you. When they've got a problem, they know you can solve it. Your job is not to convince people they've got a problem they weren't aware of. Daft. It's a good British expression there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I always say, you need to be on top of mind when the time for them to make a decision to buy comes in. And in most cases, we've seen the research recently which says, like, whenever B2B companies buy, usually it's one of the companies from the list they already have before they started the search, right? So they already are predetermined, no matter if it's like the brand, or if it's personal relationships, whatever it is, they already have decided before. They do the research just to basically confirm their decisions. And there is this thing, as we call it, biases. One of the biases inside, I like to say, they protect their assets, right? If I make this decision, will it cost me a job or no? Or will it cost the company something? Those kind of things. And those are not the small decisions and not the small things to consider when you are actually thinking about B2B sales. But tell me,
and if you're going to replace an incumbent supplier, it's because you've worked hard to generate a relationship. It's not because you've, exacerbated a problem. At that point they already know they've got the problem. So and perhaps that's why there is such a thing, this whole thing about agitating, problems and creating mythical problems, because maybe the world is focused too much on first time buyers rather than developing relationships with people that might want to change, their supplier. So again, it's actually a customer acquisition versus getting people just to change from an incumbent supplier to you. But again, it all comes down to relationships and being there. It's not about, and then, there's the whole FOMO thing and false scarcity thing. And that just drives me even more insane. I mean, I went to a thing the other week in Cambridge, and it was fascinating because it was all about, neuro marketing. And somebody says that's not a real thing, but let's ignore that for the minute. What we do know is that there's only a set number of fixed emotions, and they all have different sort of, there's a map of how the different emotions make you feel, and that and they can all be boiled down into this lovely graph. And what it basically showed was that there are 3 elements to every emotion, and they all sort of add together in this lovely 21 bar graph, and they all combine. And if you look at fear is actually the emotion where we're actually most receptive to things, because the 3 different elements that make up one factor are all equal. So one is not overriding the other. So therefore, we're actually at our most open and susceptible to listening to what somebody's got to say. And that is why fear is used so much, as a marketing tactic. But it's wrong and it's bad and it's evil and it shouldn't be allowed. If there's real scarcity, like I'm putting on an event and I've only got 12 chairs, that's fine. That's real scarcity. But FOMO in general, to me, there are brain reasons why it is used. But I still think I went a bit sidetracked there, but I still think it's fundamentally wrong, even though I understand the science behind it.
Yeah, bring back marketing where it belongs. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's being there, and it's about helping. It's about serving. This is where I don't get. To me, I'm not saying sales should be order takers. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that all the job of marketing and sales is to make the transition from I don't know you to please have my money as simple and seamless and easy and frictionless as possible. It's not to convince and cajole and persuade and scare. It's not any of those things.
Totally agree. Last 2 questions. First one is, what you are doing is basically, I don't know what this is. Interesting. How to transform tech startups.
I keep seeing little bubbles come up on the screen. I don't know what that's all about, but we'll take it.
Yeah, that's the first one. So how to transform tech startups to the grown S companies. What are 3 things that you would recommend them to do, to look after, to kind of get to that journey?
Right. Well, so 3 things. I mean, the first has got to be, focus and prioritize, which is what I will always come back to. The second, I think, is very much have a robust business model. What are your inputs? What are your outputs? What are your processes? That way you can get to see whether it all hangs together or whether bits of it start to contradict each other. And then a third thing, I think, I've just made this up, but I think it's true, is it's kind of like have an open door, listen and ask for input. And I think have an open door policy where you haven't just made your mind up about things. You live in a world of hypotheses, and every day your hypotheses get, proved or disproved or clearer or more muddy, and you iterate. So perhaps by the open door policy, then my third thing is, iterate. That doesn't mean you should have, your strategy should be the last sentence the last person said to you in the last meeting. That's just hopping about like a lunatic. But I think being open to input from the market, and especially from your customers, and iterating gracefully would probably be my 3 bits of advice there.
Yeah, now somebody will say, it seems nice and easy, just have a good business model.
Oh no, it's really, really hard work. I mean, it's developing a robust business model and that's why, when I do sort of a half-day workshop, that's quite often just the one thing that we talk about. But if you do it right, it will have your inputs, your outputs, it won't contradict each other. Then you'll say, well, what about we do this? And you're like, well, that contradicts the business model we've just developed. So either your business model is wrong or you don't do that. Which is it? And you can wrap your values around that, and you can get very, very clever with your business model, but it does give you it's not easy, because if it was easy, then we'd all just do it, wouldn't we? So it's difficult and it iterates, but it gives you a framework to keep things in, and it gives you barriers to keep things out. And so it's something worth striving for.
Yeah, I mean, when they have a business model, when they know how do they make money, they're not startup anymore. So
Yeah.
that's how important it is, that one step. But also, I mean, the other two that you mentioned. So the last question for the end: tell people where they can find you, information about you, and everything that you do.
Oh, lovely. Yes. Well, I'm Nicky Dibben on LinkedIn. I talk about 360-degree marketing, which is my own framework. It's got 8 things in it, 7 of which come before marketing plan. So it is properly the embodiment of the renaissance of real marketing. And yeah, LinkedIn is probably, it's the only social platform that I hang out on, and it's probably the best place to find me. And as I said, always happy to connect. I help with various accelerator programs and so on as well, so you sort of might find me on some of those. But yeah, always happy to connect, and always happy to spend 45 minutes to an hour chatting with people if I can help. That's never ever a problem. So yeah, find me on LinkedIn. That'd be lovely.
Same, guys. Now you know what to do. Nikki, tell me one thing for the end. What the future brings for you? What's in plans?
What the future brings for me? Well, other than writing my book and being on a world stage, telling tech companies how to be awesome, to me, it's about, I think, the next level of documentation of what I feel a marketing mindset looks like and how that can be embodied in tech companies of all stages, from idea to technology to product to commercialization to IPO to conquering the world. The mindset and the philosophies and the practices are pretty much the same. It's just the scale that varies. And so I think my next step is going to be to write my book. And now I've said that publicly at least 3 times in the last month. I really have to get on and do it. See me on a world stage signing books sometime soon.
Yeah, it's nice. I love that so many people are now, into the process of writing books or publishing them, and especially, bringing in new frameworks, new ideas, because I think the world needs that, right? Right. Usually,
It
the
needs new
newest.
ideas, and it also needs proper execution of the old ideas. Let's not throw out the old ideas at the expense of new ideas. Let's combine the both for the greater good.
Exactly, because I think we're living in the times when a lot of things are working, and company needs to try out to see what's working for them. And if people like you, like my friend Maya Voye, who just published the book about go-to-market strategies, can help them by writing a book and actually telling him these are your options, right? This
Yeah.
is how you can do it. Maybe they can save them time or effort or money in their
Exactly, and
ways
a
to
lot
go
of
it.
new is a lot of new is tactical, and that's right. But your tactics are only your time-based manifestation of your strategy, and so the strategy stuff will never go out of fashion. The tactics will come and go and change as they should to be better, faster, cheaper, whatever. But the renaissance of real marketing, bring it back to the foundations, and they'll never go out of fashion.
I totally agree. I mean, and it's great because I feel like there's this one group of people that are not listening to the podcast, they are reading the books, and like the new stuff and the new tactics and everything else is in the podcast, not in the articles that you can find on Google. There are a lot of old stuff over there, or eventually it is on LinkedIn, but you need to uncover it and see who's bullshitting, who's talking the real
Yeah,
thing. And then if you have a book, it's already structured, you already went through the research, through the process, and it's easy for them to digest. And when we reach out that group of people, then I think we'll all move along. So thanks for contributing to that, and I'm looking forward to reading it.
excellent. I'm gonna have to write it now.
I mean, it is what it is. I try to write one myself. I don't know. I'm still into writing more stories and then coming up with something more specific and business
I
oriented. But
think we have
we'll
to
see.
do an anthology of lots of books. I think that's the problem because we've been around forever. We want to put every single thing we know about every single thing in one book, and that's not possible. So it's about picking one thing, I think, and crafting a book around that, and then book 2 will be another thing. So I think my first one is about the mindset side of it, and the philosophies, because we could probably both write, encyclopedias, but we should just get one thing written and out the door, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with that because I usually go with stories, right? I go to the conferences, online, offline, whatever it is, and then you see like Chris Walker, Andrei Zinkevich, all other people coming up with the frameworks, with data, with whatever, and I'm like, I'm gonna tell a story and to describe dark funnel as like how somebody made a decision when I was a kid. when I found out
Yeah.
what it is, or those kind of things. And I'm like, I will help a larger group of people understand that. Then they can go and they can read data, analytics, every other stuff when they know how things actually work.
Yeah, I think I'm all about storytelling. I mean, we won't digress about how a lot of people have ruined the word storytelling for the rest of the world, but proper storytelling, again, brought back to its old-fashioned ways of using metaphor and analogy and powerful languaging, to get to drive home the message that you're trying to get across. That will again never go out of fashion. Where I object to people go, a story is all you need, and I'm like, no, a storytelling as a skill is really powerful, but a story is not all you need. In life, sadly.
Exactly, especially in life.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks for being with me here for an hour now. Going into the things, chatting. As I always say, guys, go back to the beginning of the episode, listen to everything that we said. We impact a lot of stuff, and then when you see something that you need more explanation, or you need more advice on that, or maybe you need a whole framework that Nicky has created, go ahead, write her a message. Tell her that you have seen here, listen to her on the Funky Marketing podcast, and let's continue the conversation on LinkedIn, or on any other medium that we are all using. Nicky, thanks again.
Sounds
And
fabulous.
what we always say for the end: keep it funky, guys. That's the only thing.
Absolutely. Thanks for
Bye
having
bye.
me.